Well, before I even answer questions today, I want to talk about just a really simple point. I call it Coaching 101. Now, I teach religious studies, and at the university or college level, 101 is usually your general survey courses, and I teach 101 for Columbia. I have these three very simple principles. The first is invest wisely in asymmetrical risks. We're going to come back to that one. Number two is embrace the obvious, which I think is the hardest thing really for young coaches to get their arms around because, and I always make the joke, sprinters sprint, hurdlers hurdle, throwers throw, jumpers jump, swimmers swim, bikers bike. That's the key. And people go, yeah, but I read this thing. Okay, stop reading, get people back throwing and stuff like that. And what I do as a strength conditioning coach is I support bikers biking, throwers throwing, jumpers jumping. And then number three is respect the process. If you respect the process, you do what you need to do every day. You take care of business. You follow the fundamentals. You keep an eye on asymmetrical risks. The results will happen. In my art of coaching lecture, I always talk about, instead of trying to do a 2-week diet or 1-week detox, if you went to bed and slept 9 hours a day, 9 hours a night, I guess, and you ate protein and veggies and drank water at every meal, you didn't eat crappy carbs, sugar and junk and soft drinks and, the stuff that you're not supposed to, and you did some kind of reasonable training 2, 3, 5 times a week, whatever, and you did that for 2 decades, we wouldn't be having this conversation about a 2-week rapid fat loss diet because you would take care of business. If you focus on the process, the results take care of themselves. But let's sneak back to number one. You got to invest wisely in asymmetrical risks. Now, I get this from my wife, Tiffany. She works for Treasury, and her job is to keep your money safe. And so her number one job is to look at little things that might end up being big things. And her key is this. What could go wrong? What? Number one job of a coach is to stand back and say, what could go wrong? You show up on a football field with 90 young boys and they want to play American football. What could go wrong? Well, I'm telling you folks from experience, a lot. And that's what you need to think about. So I get these questions all the time, and I'm not a horrible person. But people will say, Dan, why don't you like heavy Turkish get-ups? Why don't I like heavy Turkish get-ups? I'm looking at a 16-year-old girl trying to, do a Turkish get-up with the beast. What could go wrong? A whole bunch of things. A friend of mine who trains with me in the gym has a video of himself trying to do a Turkish get-up, and as he comes down, his left hand slips. With a 32K bell, it comes down and crashes on his chest. Fortunately, he's fine. But what could go wrong there? Well, let's just think about the impact of a 32-kilo bell hitting your heart area or down here in the softer tissue areas. Or worse, what if it hits your head? And all of a sudden, we're talking about a very serious issue that could have been easily dealt with by saying, what could go wrong? Now, how you fix it is either, like in my case, we don't do heavy Turkish get-ups. I love putting a coffee cup. In fact, the hotter the better. That's a joke, okay? I usually use a Dixie cup half filled with water, and you do the Turkish get-up with that overhead. If that glass moves, it spills cold water on you, and we all laugh. No danger, no one gets hurt. Can anything go wrong with a one-handed kettlebell swing? Yeah, I've seen a lot of one-handed kettlebell swings that look awful. What's the worst that can happen? Under ballistic load, you start twisting and moving and flexing, and something bad happens to your back. What can go wrong if you decide to go to the top of Mount Olympus over here and take your mountain bike and go all the way to the bottom? What possibly could go wrong? Well, why don't you wear a helmet? Let's do that first. Maybe you ought to wear some other protective gear. So when I get a lot of questions that especially on the Instagram account, and I'm not very good at answering the questions. I'm good at this. Folks, I'm almost 63. Ask your grandfather to text you. I text like this, so my responses are always very slow. So when I do respond to you, understand that it is a moment of kindness and clarity that I'm trying to do. But sometimes people ask these questions, and the first thing I want you to think about before you ask the question is when I don't recommend something, usually it's because I've already asked the question, what could go wrong, or worse, and I apologize for this. I've already seen this thing go wrong, and I should have been a better coach back then. So before we start diving into questions, always remember to take time to think about what could go wrong, and then from there, embrace the obvious and try to make it better. And of course, if you make everything a little bit better, the results will speak for themselves.